So we bought the house September 26th, 2014, which means we're now on week 88 of this project. We've been working on this house for 88 weeks. That's almost 2 entire years. So at this point, we're just pushing as hard as we can to get this house to a CO, because once we get a CO, a lot of things change. Our insurance drops, we get changes on our interest rates. There are a lot of reasons why we want to get to a CO at this point, besides just the fact that we want to be able to live in a house. What we have going on this weekend, it's Memorial Day weekend, and we have a lot of trim work that has to be done. We need to start trimming out the windows, start hanging doors, just about everything. Stairs has to be trimmed out, and I've got the flooring guys scheduled to be here Monday. So we really just have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to really bust butt and try and get this thing done. We got a lot of tricky things to figure out here with the trim, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I've done trim on commercial properties, but I've never done household trim. It's much fancier, it's much nicer, it has to be done correctly, and you have to be able to think your way through these things, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Ricky doesn't know what he's doing, so this weekend we've decided to call in the teacher. The first time I ever heard my dad referred to as the teacher, I remember going to his office in Charlotte, and I was meeting with some of his colleagues, their commercial real estate needs, and they were joking with me, and they were like, we always call your dad the teacher because your dad likes to teach. He knows so much, he has so much knowledge, he comes into a situation and he has a great way of explaining things to everybody. And so the first time I ever heard my dad's nickname, the teacher, it just cracked me up. But what's funny is he is actually a professor now for one of the Ohio State colleges. We had put together a list of trim that we needed to get to have there Friday morning in order to start the project. But I know that the trim is a lot trickier than just putting together an order form and shipping it out to the stockyard. So now that my dad's here, we have to go through all of the trim work and really make sure that we have all the pieces that we're gonna need for this project. And because I had Ricky come in, we just kind of set Ricky on repairing the fireplace hearths, which we started the weekend before, so that Ricky has something to do, even though he's coming in on Friday and we don't have our materials yet. Because part of the thing in running a project like this is just keeping everybody going, knowing what projects have to be done, and when you have an issue that comes up, keep everybody moving onto one of the projects that can be done while you try and figure out what it is that you need to get things moving in the other directions. We had called in the property inspector because we needed him to kind of tell us all the things that we need to do to get to our final CO. There's never a better time than before you get to that point to just try and nail the inspector down and say, hey, what do we need? So we called him in for a water line inspection. Now, when I did our water lines, I wasn't thinking water line inspection. I was thinking, hey, I know what I'm doing, I'm gonna do a great job on this, and I can knock this thing out in a weekend. So I buried the water lines and the power lines. Luckily, I film everything. So when the inspector came out and he had to see how deep the ditch was, we were able to show him on video and show him with markings and relative depths that our water lines were deeper than they needed to be, that the soil type was right, and even though it was right, we added sand. So that part of the inspection kind of went well, kind of didn't. He kind of gave me a hard time about it. But then, you know, we walked around the house and we ran into a couple other issues. One, when they built the front porch and they trimmed it out on the outside, it's trimmed out all the way down to the ground, but you can't use a material that's not warranted by the manufacturer to touch the ground if it's not made to touch the ground. So we have to replace that front trim work before we can get a CO with a material that is able to touch the ground. Another area that we ran into is where we expanded on the foundation, and where that section was expanded onto, there's a big crack going down it. And that crack is most likely because that part of the foundation settled after the first part of the foundation, There's most likely no structural issues with it, but we still have to get a letter from our engineer. We still have to have it repaired. Other issues we ran into were pretty simple issues we knew we were going to run into. We had some water puddling in the front of the house. I mean, it's a hard grade because of the big oak trees there, but we think we figured out a solution. The inspector's willing to work with us as long as we can put an architectural stamp on what we do to get that drained out of there. But we have a few ideas. We might bring in a little bit of dirt, but we just need some dirt moving equipment to move things around. We'll be good to go on that. So while we're waiting on the inspector, you know, I've got this time capsule idea that I would like to put in the base of one of the chimneys. But I need a box, like a little metal box or something to put my stuff in that I could then bury in the chimney before we cover it with concrete. So I decide I am going to head out to the barn. Our barn is just full of all sorts of junk. It's awesome. It's like a treasure chest when we bought this house. There's so much stuff here. It's really not a barn. It's more like a bunch of old pieces of wood with some falling apart metal over top that kind of blocks the rain, kind of doesn't. What I'm looking for today is just something like a little metal box. I think I found something here that might work, but I'm going to keep looking because I'm not completely sold on it. It's a little on the rusty side. When we first bought the property, the junk was like up to my chest in every single bay, and then we've kind of weeded through it. But even now when you go in there, there's just so much junk in there. And granted, a lot of the junk now, like 3/4 of it is ours, but you keep running into old stuff, like stuff from the 50s that you haven't even seen before, and it's like, oh, what's this? This is like, it's an airless paint gun. I may or may not have an issue when I go to the barn to find something. I kind of get a little sidetracked because I find so many neat things, and I'm like, well, what can we do with this? And what can we do with that? Look at these. These are like old glass panes, old windows. That's awesome. I mean, how cool is that? That is so creepy. Looks like something's about to get it. Rain shield. Well, there you have it, folks. Rain-X was not an original invention. So I come back from the barn and I'm looking around the house and I'm like, well, where's Dad? Where's the teacher at? And I look over, and on our site, if there was anything that looked remotely usable, we had them throw it in piles instead of the dumpster. Because when we were dealing with such an old house and you don't know exactly how things are going to go or what kind of touches you want to add to it, having some of those old pieces lying around can really become useful to you. I mean, we have old windows, we have an old bathtub, we have a lot of old lumber, and so I come out and he's like picking through the pile and starts just coming out with all these 1x4s, and he's just like, here's our trim work. But obviously we can't use those 1x4s for trim work because they're not finished correctly. Those trim pieces will work great for inside closets and places where people aren't sticking their head around and actually going to see what it looks like. The property inspector took, I don't know, several hours to get there. I think he knew when I put down for the inspection that my inspection was going to be more so for informational purposes, so we knew what to do to get to our CO. So he didn't arrive until, you know, mid to late afternoon. And we were kind of hoping he'd be there first thing in the morning so that we could meet with the inspector, do what we had to do, and then run off to the store to get materials. So it's now, you know, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we still haven't gotten our trim materials. It's Friday evening. Our hopes of going to a stock or a lumber yard are over, and we've almost wasted an entire day waiting on the inspector to get there. The doors of the house are the original doors from the 1900 period. And where we fell short of doors, we went to antique stores and found old doors and bought the doors to install. Subcontractors wanted $200 to $300 a door just to hang and install the door. Our quotes for trimming out this house were over $19,000. we really have to put our brains together here and figure out how to hang these old doors. I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful old doors, and it's really part of the character of the house that we want to be able to put back into it. So we've got to learn how to hang doors, and then we've got to do our trim. The issue with our trim is because we're dealing with such an old house, none of the walls are actually your standard size wall. So we have, instead of a standard 2x4 today, which is a smaller 2x4, we have 2x4s that are true cut 2x4s, which are hardier and stronger, but they're also a different dimension. So the depth isn't the same as your standard 2x4. So what we did when we ordered the windows was we actually had them add on a little half piece to the of trim to the inside of the windows, but even then they're still not coming up flush with the drywall. So the windows are going to be an issue. The front door is going to be an issue because that is a standard dimensional door and frame, and so it's sitting in about a ½ inch from where we really need it to be. Okay, so we're at Lowe's and we're really trying to put together the trim, and nothing's working out because your standard trim work is like a ½ inch. It just looks junky to have ½ inch trim instead of, you know, a full 3/4. It just wasn't gonna work. So my dad and I, we kind of just start building out a vision in the store. And when I say building it out, I mean we actually built it in the store. And you know, every time I came back to an aisle with something else, my dad had more of the doorway done. Even the guys there at Lowe's started helping to build this thing out and create what we were gonna do for the trim inside the house. And we were sitting there pulling up pictures from Pinterest and things that Shauna's pinned, and just trying to get as close a look and a feel based on the materials that they had there in the store, but yet make it that nice, rich feel that you would get in a traditional 1900 home without kind of using this cheap, flimsy stuff. So once we figured out how we wanted everything laid out and what the design of it was going to be, and we got as much of the trim work as possible, we finally loaded up, I think around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, with all the trim we could possibly buy, and we're finally now just getting back to the house where we can, you know, start at least organizing for Saturday.